Hi, I'm Camila.
I was 17 when my parents told me the college fund was gone. Not missing, not lost in some market crash, but gone by choice, given to my sister.
Just like that.
No warning, no apology, no explanation that made sense. They said it was a family decision. But I was part of the family, wasn't I? I remembered sitting on the edge of the staircase, watching my mother's mouth move while my ears filled with a strange ringing. The words were soft but sharp. Your sister needs it more.
Her future depends on this.
She's going to make something of herself. They said it like a compliment to her, but it landed on me like an accusation. What was I then, if not someone worth investing in? My sister, Selena, stood beside them with perfect posture and glossy hair, clutching her acceptance letter to some Ivy League school like a trophy. Her eyes flicked toward me only once, and even that glance felt like a brush-off, like I was a speck of dust on a window she didn't bother to clean. She didn't say, "Thank you." She didn't say sorry. She just said it was for the best, as if the universe had been rearranged in the only way it was ever meant to be. That night, I went to bed without dinner. Not because I was protesting. I just didn't have the stomach for it. The walls of my room felt thinner than ever. I stared at the ceiling until it blurred, thinking of all the hours I'd spent studying, applying for scholarships, planning my future. My vision board on the wall had photos of campuses, tech labs, startup logos, girls holding laptops like they belonged in those spaces. I used to believe I'd be one of them. But that night, something cracked. Not a loud break. More like a thread that snapped quietly inside, just enough to change the shape of me. In school, I stopped raising my hand. I kept my head down and focused harder. I learned how to blend in. I took on shifts at the bookstore down the street, cleaned out garage sales for parts, watched coding tutorials late at night until the blue light stung my eyes. I didn't know what I was building yet. I just knew I was done waiting for someone to open the door. If they wouldn't help me build a life, I'd build one without them. The years passed slow and fast, like time had two speeds, one for pain and one for survival. My parents stopped talking about college. They assumed I'd just find a job, maybe work retail, maybe go to community college if I saved up enough. Selena's updates filled the family conversations. Her professors, her internships, her social media following, her invitations to elite networking dinners. I learned how to nod at all the right times. But inside, I was collecting pieces. Every part of me that had been dismissed, overlooked, counted out. I saved those like blueprints. By the time I was 20, I had something real. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't public. But it was working. A small digital tool I'd built on my laptop, a productivity and collaboration app for young creators like me, people with big ideas but no backing. I called it Sola, after the Latin word for alone. I liked the sound of it. Quiet but certain. At first, I tested it with local artists and freelance designers. Then small schools. Then whole youth organizations. Word spread, slow and organic. I kept my name off it for the first few months. I didn't want the attention. I just wanted to prove it could work. And it did. Better than I expected. I watched as the download numbers climbed, then doubled, then multiplied like a heartbeat I couldn't control. I partnered with a nonprofit in Atlanta. I landed a mentorship call with a VC from San Francisco who told me the market was hungry for something like this. Clean UI, low cost, collaborative first. I took meetings during my lunch breaks at the bookstore, dressed in old jeans and borrowed confidence. Nobody knew I was 20 and had never set foot in a dorm. I stopped needing to explain myself. The product spoke first. When the investment came, it didn't feel real. 6 figures wired to my account in 2 waves. The contract was clean. The pitch was solid. The name on the paperwork was mine. And suddenly, people started using a word I'd never heard directed at me before. Founder. But I didn't tell my parents. Not right away. Not because I wanted revenge. I just wanted peace. And I didn't trust them not to ruin it. Then came the email. A reporter from Forbes. She'd come across Sola through a feature on young tech talent under 25. She wanted an interview. She said my story was refreshing and inspiring. A girl who built something in the shadow of nothing, who didn't get the golden ticket, but found another way in. She asked about my background. I told her the truth, carefully. Not the petty version.
Just the facts.
I said I'd planned to go to college, but life took a different path. I said my family had other priorities. I said I learned how to pivot. The article dropped on a Monday morning. It was longer than I expected. Beautifully written. My name was in the headline. My photo, me sitting at my small desk in a hoodie and sneakers, smiling with a little disbelief, was on the front page of the site. My inbox lit up. Messages from old classmates, teachers, strangers, other girls who said they'd felt invisible too. And then came the call. It was my mother. Her voice sounded off. Not proud, not warm. More like confused and slightly irritated. She said someone had sent her the article. She said she didn't realize I was doing that well. She asked why I hadn't mentioned anything. I reminded her gently that we hadn't spoken in months. She said something about how Selena was still in her last year, and things had been stressful, but they'd always cared about both of us. I didn't argue. I just listened. Then she asked something that made my stomach tighten. She wanted to know if I'd consider helping with Selena's upcoming tuition gap. She said the program was expensive, and they hadn't expected her final year abroad to cost so much. She said I seemed to be in a good place now. I stared at the floor while she talked, the old carpet in my rented apartment curling at the edges. My throat felt tight, like it had been wrapped in tape. I thought about all the nights I'd gone without heat, or proper meals, or sleep. I thought about the college tours I never got, the counselors I never met, the dreams I had to bury and dig back up again. And I thought about Sola, the thing I built with my bare hands and quiet rage. I didn't say no. But I didn't say yes either. I told her I had to go, that I had a meeting. She said she understood. But I don't think she did. Because the truth was I wasn't done building. And I wasn't done remembering.
Not yet.
The call from my mother stayed in my mind longer than I wanted. I kept hearing her voice loop in the background of my day, like some echo from a song I couldn't skip. You're in a good place now. That line gnawed at me. Good place? As if I'd stumbled into success the way someone stumbles into a lucky lottery ticket. As if I hadn't built it from nothing, line by line, night by night, in the quiet where no one watched. I tried to shake it off, to bury myself in work like I always did when things got loud inside my head. But even as I stared at my code, the words blurred, replaced by old memories I thought I'd outgrown. The time they forgot to show up at my debate tournament. The way my sister's smallest achievements were met with confetti and cake, while mine barely earned a passing nod. Selena hadn't called. Not after the article. Not even a text. I knew better than to expect it. She didn't operate in the same emotional currency. Everything with her was image, control, optics. We hadn't been close in years. And yet it still hurt, that hollow silence. She didn't even pretend to be happy for me. But someone else did reach out. A woman named Mara, who had been in the same freshman computer science class as Selena. She messaged me through LinkedIn, then again through email, asking if we could talk. She said she had something important to share. At first, I was cautious. The tech world was small, and I didn't trust easily. But something about her message made me pause. She said she'd read the Forbes article and had been sitting with something for months, something that involved Selena and me. We met at a quiet cafe near the downtown train station. She wore a navy hoodie, no makeup, her hair tied back in a rushed bun. She looked like she hadn't slept. She also looked nervous. She said she'd been roommates with Selena during their first year at college, that they had shared everything from textbooks to toothpaste to secrets after too many drinks. And then she told me the thing that shifted everything again. Selena had known about the college fund, about how it was mine first. She told Mara over late-night wine and whispered laughter that she never thought I'd do anything important with it, that I was too soft, too aimless, too attached to childhood dreams, that she, on the other hand, had a real shot. So when our parents offered the fund, she hadn't hesitated. In her words, it was an investment with a better return. Mara looked ashamed as she repeated it to me, but I barely heard her voice by the end. My mind had gone quiet, cold, like someone had turned off the color in the room. I nodded, thanked her, paid for her drink, and walked out into the heavy evening air. That night, I sat at my desk for hours, unmoving. The lights stayed off. I didn't need to see anything. I already knew the truth. I'd always suspected it, but hearing it confirmed made something inside me settle. Not in defeat, but in decision. The next week, I was invited to speak at a Youth Innovation Summit, the kind of event filled with well-dressed founders and crisp one-liners about growth and grit. I almost said no, but something about standing on that stage, saying things out loud, felt necessary now. The night before, I rewrote my speech. I took out the polished version, the one that glossed over the hard parts. I replaced it with the truth, not to shame anyone, but to light something for others who might be sitting in the dark like I once was. The crowd was quiet at first, unsure, but by the end, they clapped like they meant it. A few came up after, thanking me, telling me they saw themselves in my story. One girl, maybe 17, said she'd been hiding her art from her family because they called it a waste of time. I told her it wasn't. I told her they were wrong. The next twist came 2 days later. Selena posted a public statement on her social media, long, curated, tearfully written. She said she was deeply hurt by how her family had been portrayed in the media, that certain people were rewriting history for attention, and that she would no longer stay silent while false narratives damaged her future. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. The post ended with a link to a fundraiser for her graduate program's overseas project. At first, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly her. Control the narrative. Cry before you're blamed. Raise money from strangers who didn't know the full story. The post gained traction, sympathy. But it also attracted curiosity. People started looking deeper. Screenshots surfaced. Old tweets. Inconsistencies in her resume. Whispers turned louder. And then someone on the fundraiser page asked a simple question. If your parents funded your education, why are you asking us to cover your grad school? No one answered. Not for hours. Then someone else shared the Forbes article. Within a day, Selena closed the fundraiser. Within 2, she locked her accounts. I didn't feel victorious. Not exactly. But I did feel clear. Like fog had lifted, and I could finally see the shape of things without distortion. The next week, I received an invitation from a woman named Laura, a board member of a female founder coalition. She said she'd read everything, my article, my summit talk, the viral posts, and wanted to nominate me for a National Recognition Award for Under 30 Innovators.
I said yes.
Not because I needed the award, but because I'd finally stopped being afraid to be seen. I flew out to New York for the ceremony in a borrowed black dress and sneakers I hadn't had time to clean. The room was glittering, full of people who looked like they belonged in magazines. I stood on stage beneath a chandelier that cost more than my childhood home and accepted the award with trembling hands. I thanked my team. I thanked the early users of Sola. And then I paused. I thought about my parents. I thought about my sister. I didn't thank them. Afterward, at the reception, a man in a charcoal suit approached me. His name was Harris, and he was a tech editor for a major publication. He asked if I'd consider writing a longer piece, my full story. Not just the app. The girl behind it. He said people needed to hear it. I agreed. And when that story came out, everything changed. This time, the article was more than just a profile. It was a revelation. It detailed the years of neglect, the misdirection of the college fund, the quiet perseverance behind the brand. It didn't attack anyone directly. It just told the truth. And sometimes, truth is sharper than any weapon. The story trended. Within days, Sola's user base tripled. Investors called. School boards emailed. Foundations offered grants. And somewhere in the middle of that storm, I got a message I didn't expect. It was from my father. It was short. Just a few lines. He said he was sorry. That he hadn't known how much it had hurt me. That he should have fought harder for me. That he read every word, twice. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't reply. Not because I hated him, but because I had nothing left to give that conversation. I wasn't the quiet girl anymore, waiting for a seat at their table. I had built my own table, and it was full. The message from my father sat unread for a week before I archived it. I didn't delete it. I wasn't angry the way I used to be. I was just done waiting for accountability that always arrived too late, wrapped in thin words that felt more like relief for them than healing for me. It's strange how apologies can feel like demands. Like they're not really saying sorry, they're asking you to let them off the hook. But this hook had been in my skin for years, and pulling it out wasn't going to be that easy. Sola continued to grow. Within weeks of the latest article, our app was featured in a national education initiative. School districts reached out. Community centers wanted training programs. Young creators sent in portfolios, hoping to join our internship beta. The platform that had started as a lifeline for me was becoming a bridge for others. And I was proud, but also tired. Not the kind of tired sleep could fix. The kind that settles into your bones when you've been fighting for space your whole life. Winning doesn't erase the wounds. It just shows you how deep they went. And then another twist came. This time, from the one person I had never expected to hear from. Selena. The email subject line was blank.
No greeting. No apology.
Just her name and a link. It led to a digital magazine feature about an ethics board review into a research paper she'd co-authored. The article said there were allegations of citation misrepresentation and uncredited data usage, and that a formal investigation was underway. It wasn't confirmed. It wasn't a scandal, yet, but it was enough to raise eyebrows. Enough to cast shadows. The kind of thing that elite institutions hate having their names attached to. Under the article, in small italic text, was a single line. All inquiries should be directed to Ms. Selena Rivera's representation. Representation. She'd hired a publicist. I didn't respond to her email, but I read it 3 times, like I was trying to decode a message she hadn't written. Was it a warning? A veiled threat? A silent plea? Or just damage control? Later that week, I got a call from a woman named Nadine who introduced herself as a consultant for image rehabilitation. She said she was working with a party close to me and that there was interest in arranging a possible joint media appearance. I asked her to be more direct. She said Selena wanted to do a filmed interview, a sister reconciliation feature. She used words like powerful, redemptive, family unity. She said it could benefit both our brands. I said nothing. She kept talking. She said a producer from a national network had already shown interest, that the exposure could help us both. That's when I hung up. But I didn't forget. That same night, I received another message. This one wasn't from a stranger. It was from a woman named Lena, a family friend from years ago, someone I hadn't seen since childhood birthdays and awkward holiday dinners. She said she'd read all the recent stories and needed to tell me something that had been sitting on her chest for over a decade. She asked if I could meet in person. I almost didn't go, but something about her tone, urgent, restrained, made me curious enough to show up. We met at a library cafe, the kind with mismatched mugs and soft jazz playing in the background. Lena looked older than I remembered, but her eyes were the same, sharp, kind, direct. She didn't waste time. She said my father hadn't been just uninvolved in the decision to give my college fund to Selena. He'd been against it. Strongly. She remembered because she'd been visiting the house the day the final decision was made. She'd overheard the argument. My father had said I deserved a shot, that the fund should be split, at the very least. But Vera, our mother, had put her foot down. She said I was too sensitive, not competitive, not ready for the real world. She said Selena was the future. My father had eventually gone silent. That part one already suspected. But then she told me something else. There had been a second fund. A separate account set up by my grandparents, intended to be divided equally between the grandchildren. My mother had access as the account custodian. And 2 months before Selena's enrollment, the entire amount, meant for both of us, had been withdrawn. I sat back in my chair, heartbeat in my ears. I couldn't speak for a full minute. Lena looked like she regretted telling me, but also like she couldn't hold it anymore. She said she hadn't known the full story until recently, when another cousin mentioned the articles. That's when she realized how deep the lie had gone. I thanked her quietly. I walked out into the parking lot in a daze. And then I drove straight home, sat on my floor, and stared at the ceiling like I used to when I was 17. There had been a second fund. And they had taken that, too. For weeks, I didn't tell anyone. Not my team, not the press, not the public. I wasn't sure what I wanted. Revenge? Closure? Justice? All of it? None of it? But then another invitation came. A major conference in San Francisco. Tech Meets Ethics. They wanted me to speak. Not just about the app, but about how tech founders can rebuild systems, education, funding, access for those left behind. It wasn't just a platform. It was the spotlight. One my family couldn't control. I said yes. In the weeks before the event, I revised my speech in pieces. Not to air dirty laundry, but to make a point. To show the world what systemic erasure looks like, not in big public ways, but in quiet family decisions that shape entire futures. I changed the names. I shifted the details. But I kept the truth. The night before my flight, I got a voicemail from my mother. First one in over a year. Her voice sounded tight, like she was forcing calm through gritted teeth. She said she'd heard about the conference. She said she hoped I would be discreet. That some things were better left unsaid for the sake of dignity. She didn't say whose dignity. I deleted the voicemail. Then I packed my bags. When I stepped onto the stage that day, the room was packed. Industry leaders.
Media.
Students.
Critics.
I wore my simplest outfit. Hair tied back.
No lights. No flash.
Just me, a mic, and the weight of everything they tried to silence. I told my story. Not the easy version. I told them about how systems fail in kitchens, not boardrooms. About how loss doesn't always look like poverty. Sometimes it looks like a girl in a house with 2 working parents and no future. I told them how dreams are buried with smiling faces and polite applause for someone else. And how I learned to rebuild anyway. There was silence when I finished. Then a single clap. Then more. And then a wave. After the speech, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. She said her daughter was exactly like me. Quiet, bright, always overlooked. She said my story helped her understand what she'd missed. She hugged me and thanked me. I hugged her back. Later that night, as I scrolled through my messages, I found one from someone new. A lawyer. She specialized in inheritance and education misappropriation. She said she'd read the article, watched the speech, and had a few questions. About the family trust. About the withdrawn accounts. About rights and legal options. I didn't reply right away, but I saved her number. Just in case. Because I wasn't done yet. I didn't call the lawyer the next day. Or the day after. Not because I wasn't curious, but because part of me still hesitated at the edge of something permanent. Digging deeper meant opening old doors, the kind that don't always close again. It meant turning whispers into records, memories into exhibits. And even now, after everything, I wasn't sure I wanted to burn down what little structure was left between me and my family, even if it was built on lies. But curiosity has a way of becoming motion. Late one night, I opened my laptop and searched for my grandparents' estate records. Public access files, dry and mechanical. I filtered for dates, scanned for account numbers, skipped over legal jargon until I found it, 2 names, Selena Rivera and me. Equal beneficiaries. 1 education trust split evenly. Then came the twist. A withdrawal dated 3 months before Selena's enrollment. Full amount transferred to an account under our mother's name. That was it.
No explanation.
No joint signatures. No legal cause. Just gone. It didn't feel like a betrayal. It felt like confirmation. Like the missing piece of a puzzle I'd already solved years ago. I sat there, breathing through clenched teeth, fingers shaking slightly above the keyboard. Then I picked up my phone and called the lawyer. She didn't sound surprised. She told me she'd seen this before, quiet theft hidden as parental decisions. In most cases, people never talk about it, let alone challenge it. But I wasn't most people. She asked if I wanted to proceed with a formal claim, if I had documentation, if I was ready. I said yes. That same week, something else happened. My story from the conference was clipped and shared online again. This time it went viral. But not just in tech circles. In family circles. In legal spaces.
En parenting blog.
It became a kind of cultural litmus test. What do we owe our children? What happens when we play favorites? Thousands of comments. Most supportive. Some angry. Others defensive. And then came the national morning show request. They wanted to do a segment. From overlooked to overachiever, the startup that shook the system. They promised a sensitive approach, no family ambushes, no gotcha moments. Just my story, in my voice. I said no. I didn't want to be another headline that made people feel better for 5 minutes and changed nothing. Instead, I made my own video. Sat in front of my small bookshelf. No makeup, no edits. Just words. I told the truth again. But this time, I ended it with a question. What would happen if the next girl didn't have a startup to save her? The video hit a nerve. Tens of thousands of shares in 2 days. Emails poured in from counselors, teachers, nonprofits. Girls from foster care. Boys raised by grandparents. Kids whose college funds had vanished, too. I started tagging their stories, highlighting one a day. The feed exploded. We called it Project Solar Light, shining visibility on the invisible. It wasn't a company pivot. It was a mission expansion. Because maybe the startup was never just about productivity. Maybe it was about power. And giving it back. That was when the media found Selena again. A journalist from a respected outlet ran a deep piece, not on me, but on her. They interviewed professors, classmates, advisors. Patterns emerged. Questions around her ethics violations grew sharper. The story stopped being about an unfortunate mistake. It became something else. A reckoning. And still, she didn't reach out. But someone else did. A man named Elliot, formerly of the same foundation board that helped fund her overseas research. He sent a short message. I think it's time someone told you what happened behind the scenes. You've earned that. We met 2 days later at a bookstore cafe. He wore a gray coat, spoke slowly, measured. He said that after my Juilliard letter article went public, after the details of what my family withheld surfaced, he did some digging. He'd been on the approval board for a youth grant that my sister had supposedly spearheaded. But the application used language that mirrored my old work with underfunded students, down to the phrasing and examples. When he asked for clarification back then, the foundation was told by our mother that I had given up on that path, and that Selena was carrying the family legacy forward. My name had been used as leverage. My work, my voice, recycled and repackaged under hers. I didn't speak for a long moment after he finished. Not because I was shocked, but because it no longer surprised me how far they'd gone. He asked if I planned to respond publicly. I told him I didn't need to. The truth was already unraveling her mask faster than I ever could. The next week, my lawyer filed a formal complaint. The case was slow-moving, methodical. But it was real. And when the documents were delivered to my parents' house, the silence shattered. My father called again. I didn't answer. Then came an email from my mother. It was the longest thing she'd ever written me. Nearly 1,000 words. Full of justifications, rewritten memories, apologies tangled with excuses. She said she had been under pressure. That Selena needed more. That she always thought I would be fine. That I was stronger. That she regretted not believing in me. But wasn't I proof that I didn't need her belief? I didn't reply. But I read the last line over and over. I didn't think it would matter this much in the long run. That line said everything. Because they always think the forgotten don't feel it. That invisibility is painless. That silence is safety. That if we succeed later, the damage disappears. But I hadn't forgotten. And I wasn't invisible anymore. The final blow didn't come from me. It came from the ethics board. Selena's research credentials were formally suspended. Her fellowship revoked. Her graduation status reviewed. The fallout was immediate. Quiet. But total. A friend sent me a screenshot from her now private account. The bio line that once read future leader, changemaker, global thinker, now just said student. And then even that vanished. She deleted the account. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. But I exhaled. Not for her loss, but for the space it finally left me to breathe. The case against my parents never reached a courtroom. It didn't need to. A mediation was arranged quietly, a legal nudge that told them this wouldn't be buried under family dinners and forced smiles. The documents laid it all out. The unauthorized withdrawal of the second fund, the misuse of the trust, the pattern of financial favoritism with documented proof. My lawyer told me they would likely settle, not because they accepted guilt, but because exposure scared them more than justice. A week before mediation, I received a plain envelope in my mailbox, no name, no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for the full amount of my original college fund, and then some. The note was typed. 3 sentences. Foreclosure. Not an admission. Let's end this with dignity. I didn't cash it. I donated it. Every dollar went into the Sola Light Expansion Fund, supporting scholarships and mentorships for overlooked students in underserved communities. Kids who were told they'd never matter. Kids like I once was. And I made sure my name was on it. Not for pride, but for proof. For every quiet girl who needed to see someone like her finally stand tall. The media eventually moved on. Other stories came and went. But my platform didn't fade. Sola became a full-scale tool adopted by schools and youth programs across 3 states. We partnered with educators, artists, and community leaders to teach not just skills, but self-worth. I was invited to speak at conferences, not as the girl who was betrayed, but as the woman who built something real in spite of it. Sometimes people asked about my family. Sometimes I answered. Sometimes I just smiled and shifted the topic. Because not every wound needs to be reopened to be honored. But closure has a way of arriving when you least expect it. One fall afternoon, as golden light dripped through my apartment windows, I received a knock on my door. No delivery. No email notification. Just a knock. I opened it and found my grandmother. She looked smaller than I remembered, a little slower in her step, but her eyes were still sharp, still kind. She didn't ask to come in. She just waited. When we sat at my kitchen table, she pulled a folded letter from her purse and slid it across the surface. Her hands shook slightly. I recognized the handwriting. My name written in soft loops. My father's hand. She said she'd found it tucked in an old box when she moved residences. It had been sealed and never sent. He'd written it after the first article about my startup appeared. She said she hadn't read it. Said it wasn't hers to read. Said maybe it was too late. But then she looked at me and said, softly, or maybe not. I waited until she left to open it. The paper was creased but clean. His words careful, uneven in places. He wrote about how he watched it all unfold, unsure of when to speak, too afraid to split the family, too weak to stand up when it mattered most. He said he believed in me, always had, but didn't know how to fight her. Said the day the fund was emptied, he felt something collapse inside him too. He asked for nothing, not forgiveness, not a reply. Just said that if I ever found this, he hoped I was free. I folded the letter and placed it inside the top drawer of my desk, beside the first flyer I'd ever printed for Sola. A few days later, I finally received a message from Selena. It wasn't long, just a few lines. She said she knew I wouldn't respond, that she wasn't asking for understanding, that she had finally realized something, that being the golden child wasn't a crown, it was a leash. That everything she had been handed came with a silent expectation to succeed, to prove the family was right to bet on her. And when she stumbled, no one knew how to help her stand without someone else to blame. She said she was tired, that maybe now we both were free, in different ways. That she hoped someday I'd find peace, even if it had to be without her. I stared at the message for a long time. And then, for the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I felt sad. Not for her. Not even for what happened. But for the years we both lost pretending we weren't sisters unless the story demanded it.
I didn't reply.
But I didn't block her either. Sometimes silence isn't punishment. Sometimes it's just space. Space to figure out what healing looks like when no one's watching. Time passed. The lawsuit closed quietly.
No headlines. No chaos.
Just a signature and a settlement that marked the end of that chapter. My mother didn't reach out again. My father never sent another message.
But I stopped needing them to.
Because my life wasn't paused waiting for their approval anymore. It had become something solid, rooted, my own. Years later, I was walking through a campus, one I'd never attended, where solo was being used as a core tool in a new entrepreneurship program. A girl approached me, maybe 16, nervous, wide-eyed. She held her tablet like it might break in her hands. She said she recognized me from a panel. Said she wanted to build something too, but didn't know how to start. Said her parents wanted her to study law, not coding. Said they didn't believe in ideas that didn't look like office jobs. I smiled. I told her I used to be invisible, too. And then I sat with her for an hour. We mapped out her first prototype.
I didn't need to be thanked.
Her excitement was enough. But as I left, she handed me a folded paper with messy handwriting. Thank you for making space for someone like me. That night, I went home and pinned it beside my desk, next to the check I never cashed, the letter I never sent, and the printout of the first Forbes article.
Proof
that I didn't win because I was lucky. I won because I remembered who I was when they didn't. And now, I make sure no one else forgets again. Because some of us aren't born chosen.
Some of us have to choose ourselves.
And when we do, we don't just rise. We build ladders behind us. So the next girl doesn't have to climb alone.